On October 1st, sirens blared across Israel, sending waves of panic through the streets. People scrambled for cover, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. Iran had launched a massive missile attack, targeting key locations and causing widespread destruction. The missiles streaked across the sky, leaving trails of smoke in their wake. This was a significant escalation in the conflict, marking a dangerous turning point. The world watched in horror as tensions reached a boiling point. Israel vowed a swift and decisive response, with the Prime Minister addressing the nation, promising to defend the country at all costs. Military vehicles were seen mobilizing, ready for action. The world held its breath, fearing a full-blown war. Global leaders called for calm while the United Nations convened an emergency meeting to address the crisis. The situation was incredibly tense, with soldiers on high alert and military personnel bracing for the worst. The atmosphere was charged with anxiety and anticipation. Both countries have powerful militaries, each capable of inflicting significant damage. Military drills and preparations were underway, showcasing their readiness for conflict. Israel has cutting-edge technology and strong US support, including advanced defense systems designed to intercept incoming threats. This collaboration has bolstered Israel's defensive capabilities. Iran possesses a vast arsenal of missiles and drones, making it a formidable adversary. Their military equipment is sophisticated and capable of reaching distant targets. A direct conflict between them would be devastating, leading to large-scale destruction and loss of life. Battle scenes would dominate the region, leaving areas in ruins. The potential consequences were terrifying, with civilians bearing the brunt of the conflict. News headlines painted a grim picture of the disaster's aftermath. The entire Middle East could be thrown into chaos, with conflict zones spreading and cities descending into turmoil. Regional protests and unrest would likely follow. The global economy could be severely impacted, with stock markets reacting to the instability and oil prices fluctuating wildly. Economic analysts warned of far-reaching consequences. The human cost would be immeasurable, with countless injured civilians and a growing humanitarian crisis. Refugees would flee conflict areas, seeking safety and shelter. In the wake of the attack, President Biden urged restraint from Israel. He made several calls to key leaders, emphasizing the need for a measured response. He cautioned against immediate retaliation, stressing that a hasty response could escalate the situation further. Biden stressed the need for de-escalation, urging all parties involved to consider the broader implications of their actions. He emphasized the importance of avoiding a wider war, highlighting the potential for regional instability. Netanyahu, however, remained defiant. He insisted on Israel's right to defend itself, asserting that the nation would not stand idly by in the face of threats. He vowed to respond forcefully to Iranian aggression, making it clear that Israel would take whatever steps necessary to protect its citizens. The Israeli Prime Minister seemed determined to take action, despite Biden's pleas for caution and restraint. This difference in approach highlighted the complex relationship between the two allies, showcasing the delicate balance of diplomacy and defense. The US remained committed to Israel's security, providing military aid and support, but it also recognized the danger of a wider conflict, understanding that escalation could have far-reaching consequences for the entire region. The missile attack from Iran was not an isolated incident. It occurred within a broader context of Israeli military operations. Israel was already engaged in conflicts on multiple fronts. In Gaza, tensions with Hamas remained high. Israel continued its blockade of the territory. Airstrikes and rocket attacks were frequent occurrences. The humanitarian situation in Gaza was dire. In Lebanon, Israel was targeting Hezbollah. It saw the group as a proxy for Iran. Israel conducted airstrikes and cross-border raids. This further inflamed tensions with Hezbollah and its backer, Iran. Section 4. The world watches and worries. As the situation escalated, the international community watched with growing concern. News outlets around the world covered the developments extensively, and people everywhere were glued to their screens, anxious about what might happen next. Diplomatic efforts were underway to de-escalate the conflict. Various countries sent their top diplomats to mediate and find a peaceful solution. These efforts included high-stakes meetings and behind-the-scenes negotiations. World leaders called for restraint and dialogue. They emphasized the importance of communication and understanding, urging all parties involved to come to the table and discuss their differences. The United Nations urged all parties to avoid actions that could further escalate the situation. The Secretary-General made several public appeals, highlighting the potential humanitarian crisis that could unfold if the conflict continued. The European Union called for a ceasefire and a return to negotiations. European leaders stressed the need for immediate action to prevent further bloodshed and to protect civilians caught in the crossfire. Russia and China, both with influence in the region, also expressed their concern. They held joint press conferences and issued statements calling for calm and a diplomatic resolution. However, finding a peaceful resolution proved challenging. Despite numerous attempts, the peace talks often ended in a stalemate, with neither side willing to compromise on key issues. The mistrust between the parties ran deep. Historical grievances and long-standing animosities made it difficult for any agreement to be reached. Each side felt justified in its actions. Citizens on both sides of the conflict were interviewed, expressing their unwavering support for their respective governments and their belief in the righteousness of their cause. The risk of miscalculation and further escalation remained high. With military forces on high alert and diplomatic channels strained, the world held its breath, hoping for a peaceful resolution but fearing the worst. Section 5, a future on a knife's edge. As of today, the situation remains extremely volatile. The potential for a wider war is very real. The consequences of such a conflict would be catastrophic. The international community must continue to push for de-escalation. Dialogue and diplomacy are the only way out of this crisis. The alternative is unthinkable. The world watches and waits, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But for now, the future hangs in the balance. The situation could deteriorate further at any moment.